You are listening to Heroes Never Die, your one-stop spot for all the latest news, Overwatch League results, and mishaps in Overwatch. Here are your hosts, Totemly Drunk and Edinar.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to Heroes Never Die, your one-stop spot for all things Overwatch. I am your host, Tumbly Drunk, and tonight on episode 216, we're going to be taking a look at the most recent news around Overwatch, its competitive scene, and so much more. So before we get into the news and introduce you to my co-host tonight, let me just quickly take a moment to thank anyone who has joined us tonight on Twitch for our live show, and of course to thank all of our repeat listeners out there. So we're back after taking the week off. We've kind of been playing things by ear, especially because we were just after like the summer showdown, and Overwatch League Network had kind of like already covered it that week, and last week, Ed, that was basically like the only news. So we didn't really feel the need to kind of like double dip on that sort of coverage. And, honestly, like, I think that was the right call to make because we kind of got, like, a slew of other news, both esports-wise and also general Overwatch, that we can kind of dive into tonight to really, put a focal point on.
Exactly. This is the slow time for Overwatch. The game, not the Overwatch League. This is a slow time for Overwatch, as we've said all along, that Overwatch 2 is going to be when they're gonna make the major changes, the come out with stuff all the time. There's gonna be news to talk about weekly. Until then, it's gonna be kind of hit or miss. So yeah, it made sense not to do the show last week because there was nothing for us to even talk about. Now this week, that's a completely different story, as there's a bunch of stuff to talk about. But yeah, no, it makes sense. Been playing Overwatch like daily now, and that's weird. I hadn't been playing it daily for a long time,
Right.
so I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, let the hop on, especially now that, we got something to kind of unlock because there is a new challenge on live servers. But, before we talk about that, we got some interesting stuff happening just around the game. I know they had just released a new soundtrack album for Overwatch, which is something that they have called Overwatch Cities and Countries. And basically what this is an album that includes songs that are linked to all of the core maps within the game. So there's 21 tracks in all. I know some of them are also like revolving around some of like the deathmatch arenas, which I thought was kind of interesting instead of like, the main maps in this case. And basically these are like full-length versions of like those music snippets that you hear whenever you're like loaded into a map. So you're able to find the soundtrack now. It's available online either on, I know it's up on Spotify. You could also find it on YouTube. And, this is the third album, technically, that we've gotten to see from Overwatch. You had that main soundtrack that was released when the game launched back in 2016. You also had that album that, DJ Lucio had put out not that long ago either. And, I haven't had an opportunity to, like, go back and kind of, like, listen through all of the tracks. But, it's important to note, like, the music in the game, this really helps make you appreciate it more because you're not really getting like the full sort of experience just through like the load screens within the game. So I'm definitely gonna go back. The Kings Row one is probably gonna be at the top of my listening list in regards to just the track list that we have here. But really cool to see them kind of like going back and put in more like music assets out there. And who knows, maybe we can tweak some of these into future segments or any sort of themes, or even, use them as ringtones or anything like that.
Yeah, no, it's cool to do. I mean, obviously they had the one that came out with the collector's edition, but a lot of stuff has been added in the past few years. So it's kind of like they're redoing that. And it's also something you can probably play while streaming on Twitch that you're not going to get uh you know dinged about or DMCA'd or whatever it is
Mhm.
for listening to on stream. But it's pretty cool. I'm not gonna sit and jam out to it in my car. Like that ain't happening. I can't
Well,
spell
maybe
out.
maybe if it's like Junkertown and just go bow 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 bow.
Yep. No, that okay. That's the one exception. Um, but yeah, there's a whole different aspects. It's cool that they're just releasing it, and they didn't just release it with that. They released it with like with an in-game event as well,
Hmm.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah, so we do have a new weekly challenge that is going on right now that hit with the patch that dropped on Tuesday, and this one revolves around Sigma and is the Maestro challenge. So basically, everyone kind of like knows the gist by now. You have to earn 9 wins regardless of what mode. You unlock a couple of things, and the new legendary skin for Sigma basically has him like dressed to the nines. He's wearing dress up shoes, he's wearing a suit, he's got a full head of hair, and he's definitely like donning like that
Shoes.
orchestral conductor type getup. But yes, he has shoes.
He has shoes. That's important.
That's why I put that one first, because that's at the top of the list, and then everything beyond that, he's just kind of like secondary at that point. So in order to unlock the skin, basically you earn 9 match wins in whatever game mode. And then along the way, at 3 wins, I know they also have the player icon. They also have a legendary emote in this challenge, which is kind of different from what we're used to seeing, because normally it's like sprays the icon and then the skin. So I thought that was fairly interesting. So a change of pace from kind of like the norm that we're used to seeing. And, part of that is just due to the fact that Sigma was released in like one of the later cycles, so he doesn't really have a ton of emotes currently within the game. So it's something to keep an eye on to see whether or not with these newer heroes, if this is going to be kind of like a recurrent theme, or if this is just going to be a one-off. But that was a pleasant surprise here that we're just not used to seeing.
Yeah, no, it's very nice. Yeah, Sigma has shit skins. Like, let's be real. Like, Sigma has some of the worst skins in the game, and it's partially because he got released at an awkward time where he was so close to like Christmas. If memory serves me, like he was so close to like Christmas and Junker and Halloween that he wasn't a part of any of those events. Or he might have just snuck one in for the Halloween and he got a crappy one for Christmas. I don't know. He definitely is probably the hero that I'm like, this needs a new skin. So I'm very excited about this. What's weird, it looks like Emon. Like it honestly looks like Emon. With the hair and everything. So that's kind of funny. But it's nice that they're introducing, not just basically all anyone cares about normally with these is the skin. But the emote is definitely something that is different than the norm. I've got 5 wins right now already.
Nice. So
more. I'm excited. 1 more. And then 4 more.
Well, you don't want to for the emote.
Yeah, and the nice thing is Sigma's. I love playing Sigma. Sigma's probably my favorite hero to play. I mean, I this is how little competitive I play. I've only ever gotten 1 golden weapon. That's how little comp I've played.
Right.
And the 1 golden weapon I have is Sigma. So, yeah, I love playing Sigma. He's so much fun. So I'm excited to have this new skin and stuff like that, because I'm going to do it and equip it immediately.
Yeah, and I'm really glad too that the emote does tie directly into his getup as well, because it keeps with that conductor type theme, where with the emote he's actually like making his accretion rocks kind of like dance as he like conducts like the music essentially. So definitely hop on. This went live on Tuesday along with the career profile updates that we had kind of talked about a couple of weeks ago. Outside of that, it was just basically bug fixes, so not too much to really talk about there on that front. But if I'm not mistaken, I think that priority requeue was added with this patch as well. And I know, you were mentioning earlier that there was an update in similar fashion that was updated to the PTR earlier.
Yep. So, updated to the PTR today was a massive amount of workshop updates that we're not going to get into, except I will add this. They gave us the ability to make heroes different sizes.
Oh god.
So you can have one that's gigantic, one that's tiny.
That's
So that's
oh
I
what
have no idea what people can do with that.
well, I
but
can already tell you what direction R34 is going to take with that.
yes, I get that. So you have that, but they implemented priority requeue. Now, what does that mean? This is for quick play, not competitive. It's for when we've all been there, where you wait in queue for 6 minutes, 7 minutes for DPS, and then you get into a game and you backfilled for the end of a losing match, and then you have to requeue again.
Mm-hmm.
If that happens, you get priority requeue for backfilling. So it will make your waits less if you queue into a requeue. And you'll know you have priority requeue because they said they're going to indicate it next to your name or next to something. I haven't tested it out because it literally happened like 2 hours ago.
Mm-hmm.
But it will indicate next to something that you are a priority requeue, and it will severely cut down on your wait time for the next match.
Nice.
So yeah, that's actually a pretty big deal for a lot of people who just don't play competitive, which is a large portion of the game, or the majority of the game probably doesn't play competitive. Let's be realistic. So that's a very welcomed change that I'm very, very happy they implemented.
Right on. So outside of that, you know, we've talked a little bit about like Genji's recent uptick after the balance changes that he was given a couple of weeks ago. And he's definitely seen a lot more play both in the competitive aspect for both ladder as well as professional play. And, you know, right now you have Genji, who is sporting the highest pick rate and win rate out of any of the DPS heroes within the game. And we've really started to get a clearer picture of just how drastic things have started to shift in his favor in that regard. Because lately, we've seen Genji with a win rate of 51.72%. But at the higher levels of the game, at Grandmaster, that jumps just like a tick below 57%. Now I was kind of like looking on the Overbuff to see like, okay, like what is his most recent stats here? Just like this past week, he had the third highest pick rate across the hero roster. And he was only behind Sigma and Ana, who were a little bit over like 10% pick rate in that regard. But, you know, like, it's very interesting to see, like, even at this point, you know, we've been seeing a ton of like these Ana, Orisa, Brigitte compositions to pair with this Genji. And, you know, we've seen the viability of the combinations that you get, because obviously, you know, the extra armor that at one point you would get, you know, with Brigitte. You know, the Orisa Halt combinations are really good. Then you got the Nano Blade, and everything has kind of just pulled everything together to really help, like, uplift Genji further than he was prior. And, you know, there's been rumblings from our Deviant savior, Papa Jeffrey Kep, praise him, that Genji's gonna get some tweaks next week on the experimental card. So I don't know what exactly they're going to be looking at. Obviously, the recent changes were a mixture of quality of life, but also buffs. So the quality of life change being that you could now manually cancel the deflect. And, you know, I can't imagine that that would be the thing that they would be looking at to kind of, like, tone him down a little bit. So, you know, my money's definitely going to be on that shuriken damage, whether it is that or just, you know, lowering the value a little bit or looking at the spread so it's not as concise as it is currently on live. But, you know, this is what we want to see. You know, we've been seeing more aggressive changes, and yes, you know, Genji did kind of like see this massive uptick, but here we are a couple of weeks later, and they're gonna try to scale him back. So, you know, we don't want to see these long periods of time where these heroes are dubbed like overpower. You know, we want to see different heroes, kind of like moving fluidly both in and out of the meta. And, I'm anxious to see what they have on that front this next week. You're muted.
Shit. So to put this, how powerful Genji is into perspective, Genji Genji basically fell out of the meta because Brigitte got put in. So like when Brigitte was put in, if he tried to go in with his Dragon Blade, he would just get stunned and it relegated useless. Like that's one of the major things with it. That and double shields.
Yeah, that and
like he couldn't.
I want to point out too, like compared to the other mobile DPS that we were seeing, he didn't have the same damage throughput either.
Yeah. So all of that going into double shields, going into Brigitte, wasn't playable. They give a slight beat. They give a buff to him, and the top two tanks are shield tanks, and Brigitte is the number 2 healer. So like, he's so strong. He's outplaying his direct counters. Like, that is how powerful he is right now. Like, he's out. 3 of his direct counters are in game, and he's still the number 1 DPS. So that is how powerful he is right now. I don't know how they're gonna do it. I think it will have something to do with the shurikens. I don't see. This is coming from someone who doesn't play a lot of Genji. His shurikens don't. Do they have that drastic of a fall off?
No.
That is something I think they could adjust. Like the fall off. So you would have to think of it if they turn it into more of a let's aim it like a Hanzo arrow, where it's got that slight arc. You know what I mean? Instead of just spamming, you actually have to spam and aim at the same time. That could be a nerf to him that would make sense without nerfing the damage, but nerfing the skill cap. Or raising the skill cap on one of the highest skill cap heroes. That could be a thing. So I don't know. It will be interesting to see what they come up with in this this next experimental card, because let's be real, they need to buff a lot of DPS, because healers and tanks, they're actually doing a very good job of kind of balancing them. Like, there's only really one tank that's not playable. 2 tanks. Winston and Roadhog. But you have 5 tanks. So 5 of the 7 tanks are viable. Like, or 6 of the 7 tanks. Or 6 of the 8 tanks are viable. You know, every support is viable right now. Like, I can't think of one support hero that's not viable.
Well, I think in the current state of the game, Mercy would be the only one in discussion.
Yes, and Mercy is not a bad healer.
Right.
Like, she still puts out massive healing, but she does a lot of she does all single target healing, which is detrimental. But DPS, you still have those DPS where you need to move some of them up. So I think you're gonna see some Genji nerfs and then some other DPS buffs. So hopefully, that's what I'm hoping for, at least.
Well, the details for these upcoming experimental cards are pretty scarce. We do know that there are 2 currently in the works. The first one does entail some balance changes. The other one, Kaplan had noted, is to fix a, quote, failed, and I'm going to air quote that, experiment. So, as I said, like, the balance changes are expected to hit on the experimental card this next week. And really the only details that we have about that one, outside of the fact that Genji is going to see some minor changes to try to tone him down a bit, is that Moira is going to see some changes in the works, but the dev team seems to be fairly unsure of where exactly they're taking Moira. So it's like, it seems like just about every patch or like every sequence that we've seen, like with these balance changes, Moira's getting adjusted, and you know, you kind of like get to the point where after so many adjustments and still being unhappy with it, you almost have to feel like there has to be a way to rework the character. Because with the way that things are going right now, they still can't really decide on what direction to take with her. Like, they're still trying to balance how much damage output she has compared to, like, how much healing, throughput she has.
Mhm.
But again, we're in a situation now where, they announce Overwatch 2 super early. And I'm sure, I'm fairly confident to say, that the leaks definitely made them bull rush that situation. But, unfortunately, like, we don't know what the timetable is, so if a character is going to get reworked, chances are it probably wouldn't be until, the changes hit for the Overwatch 2 beta. What given time that is, we have no idea at this point, but, it just seems like Moira and D.Va have been kind of like the two problem childs when it comes to like the balancing act of the game, where they just can't seem to find that middle ground for either of them.
No, Moira is always a tricky situation because half her abilities go through ignore shields.
Mhm.
So that makes her a mandatory, almost in double shield meta, to heal your tanks. Is, well, your healing orb can go through the opponent's shields and heal your players. Like, that's pretty massive. But it's the old case of, I don't think they want a new Mercy on their hands, because like if you remember, they changed Mercy like 20 different times,
Mm-hmm.
and then finally they changed it enough where she became like a niche pick. Like, you would really only use her truly for farm Mercy, and stuff like that. So, I'm interested to see what they do with Moira. Genji, we talked about, we're getting some minor tuning down of him. I want to know what this failed experiment is.
Yeah, I have no idea what this is meant to be, because Kaplan just like, it looks to be fun for some to try, but it's just like that doesn't really help us. Like, that doesn't really
No,
tick any
and look,
boxes.
failed experiment. What the hell does that mean?
As long as it's not anything to do with Rolock.
What if it is?
It might be, for all we know.
Like, and what if it's not the failed experiment was Rolock or hero pools? The failed experiment of hero pools, and then they implement, they test out ban systems.
Could be. I could also see a situation where maybe they test the waters for 5v5. It's a possibility.
That could be. Or if you remember the 3-2-1,
Mm-hmm.
what if they do 3-2-1 the other way? Like, no, that's just goats. Like, 1 DPS, 3 tanks, 2 supports.
Mm-hmm.
But that would make the DPS queues like 45 minutes. And I don't think they want to do that. But and you know what? The only thing that comes to mind is the hero pools.
And that's
Like,
a lot of fails too.
That is a lot of fails. So maybe it's something like that. I don't know, but I feel it's something more tongue in cheek fun than that. So we'll see.
Yeah, maybe it's the Roadhog minigame on Ilios well.
Oh, screw that. Jetpack Cat? No. Who have they reworked recently that was a complete failure? Not Torbjorn. Not Symmetra. I can't think of another one that they completely reworked. So, I don't know. We'll see what Papa Jeffrey Cap has in store for all of us. Praise him, by the way.
Yep. So
but it should be fun.
balance changes next week, which means probably another balance patch a week or two after that, since, they have been cycling fairly quickly on that front. But, outside of that, really the only other thing of note that we wanted to kind of like touch up on is that there was a recent, cosmetic that was actually removed from the game that I remember you mentioning earlier, and it was revolving around McCree, in regards to one of his sprays. Now, they did give him a new spray in place of the one that they removed, so why don't you fill everyone in on what exactly is going on that front? Because, honestly, that when you mentioned it to me, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, I'm like, oh, wait, do you want to talk about this? You're like, wait, what? So McCree had a noose spray, and more tied it, obviously not tied into what we all know nooses as a horrible representation of a shitty time period. It was more geared towards like a lasso, almost noose lasso for like the Western theme. Well, Blizzard's like, yeah, no, we need to get rid of this. So they got rid of that and they replaced it with a horseshoe that just says bad luck. And they did not advertise this at all. Somebody saw it, so they just kind of, I don't think they wanted to draw attention to it, because, like, let's be real, there hadn't been a public outcry for it. So I bet you they were hoping that they could just go in, get rid of it before there's a public outcry for it, and they get more bad press.
Right.
But I'm glad they got rid of it. I didn't know it was in the game. Personally, no idea it was in the game. But yeah, they got rid of it.
Interesting note, because I was on the forums earlier, and there were a lot of threads about it. So people did take notice of it, and of course, with that you did have the occasional
asshat.
WTF Blizz, why you removing stuff from the game after you implemented it? But that kind of comes and goes with just about anything that they tweak. Within
we call them Karens and Chads.
Yes,
I've come to realize Karens and Chads. Chad is male Karens.
And there have definitely been a plethora of them, given current situations. But anyways, let's take a look at what's going on in the competitive scene. So we actually got some intriguing news this week on the esports front. So for starters, let's talk about viewership for a minute and how we've actually been seeing the tournament structure paying off in regards to boosting the amount of viewers that we've been seeing. Who would have thought a model that is a bit more exciting than games that don't matter would lead to higher numbers? Ed, this is remarkable. Who could have seen it coming?
I am shocked. Shocked and awed.
So, higher stakes, higher numbers. And the Summer Showdown saw a number of increases in high numbers with an average minute audience of 54,000, which was a 5% uptick from that previous weekend. Now, it is worth noting that week prior was also the week that they were running the double token promotion for the Overwatch League tokens. So inherently, it also saw, a little bit of a spike on that front too. And then, we just got an extra level on top of that due to the tournament format. So really happy to see that. And this was actually basically the most viewership we've seen since the opening weekend of this current season. The most watched game was that Shock versus Eternal series. And, unfortunately, we don't have, the peak viewership numbers from Blizzard. But, it's good to see that, despite kind of being stagnant for a while, even with some changes to the format, in that we, saw an uptick of anywhere from, 5 to, 10,000 viewers, which is actually pretty substantial just based off of where we were for these past couple of months here.
Yeah, it's basically an American's or even Canadians' nature to watch tournament formats more. I mean, perfect example. Look at the NCAA tournament. I mean, prior to 2 years ago, a 16 seed in the NCAA tournament had never beaten a number 1 seed ever. But millions tune in to watch that. Like they tune in to watch the 80th ranked team, 90th ranked team sometimes to play the number 1 seed in the tournament.
Now, okay, there's another part to this that you're not mentioning.
There's gambling.
There's a lot of gambling.
Okay? I will say that
that is a
true.
driving factor, in my opinion, when it comes to March Madness. Because
what about the NIT? See, a lot of people watch the NIT, and those are the NCAA tournament rejects. Like, you're too shitty to play in the NCAA tournament. We're going to put you in the NIT, and people still watch the hell out of that. It's the tournament format that people just love to watch because it's one of those people like to see those one and dones or what teams can pull off at the last minute to get that upset. Or, you know, they like to see the big things like that, hey, if they don't take this point, they're out of the tournament. They love seeing that. Whereas a normal weekly match, it's like, all right, well, if they lose this week, they, you know,
they play
they have
week.
6 more weeks to try and come back from that. That's not as intriguing. So, I mean, I like the tournament format. I watched a fair amount of games. And, you know, some people might say, yeah, they had a average of 54,000. That's low. That's obviously lower than it ever was on Twitch. But that is not taken into account Asia, like the Asian games, or the people who watch it on the Blizzard websites. Because that's where people go to watch and get tokens. You know? So, yeah, it's the viewership is definitely it's good. I think they kind of stick with this tournament format almost for not permanently for next season. Like they're gonna obviously have a bunch of homestands. They may have a bunch of homestands next season. But I fully expect them to introduce a few more tournaments into this after seeing the success of this one.
Yeah, and you know, we do have like one more tournament as well, which is the Countdown Cup. So, you know, we got that going on for the next couple of weeks for the qualifiers, and that will be the final tournament before, you know, we get to the postseason play, which we'll be talking a little bit about that format in a little bit later on tonight. So in other Overwatch League news, it's kind of been a busy week for the Guangzhou Charge. And I'll be honest, and, you know, if you're just on social media, like, seeing, like, what's going on with the Charge, and just reading the, you know, the tweet threads between their new sponsor and their new sign-in, it's been fairly entertaining. So for starters, Guangzhou Charge have a new sponsor, and I'll be honest, I don't have the company name offhand. All I've heard about Nonstop is that the sponsor is essentially a pyramid scheme. So, but, you know, I guess according to, like, Ramses was talking a little bit about it last night, they actually sponsor a ton of different esports teams. So it's not like they're a new sponsor to, you know, franchises out there. But outside of that, they have been drawing quite a bit of flack because they went out and they picked up Crystal, formerly of the Hangzhou Spark, and they signed him to a 2-way contract. So he is set to compete on the Academy team, which they acquired Ignition 1. I'm not too familiar with that team, but they did also shift Ouya to a 2-way contract so he could actually see some play, because that's someone that hasn't really been playing for the Charge this season either. But, you know, just to, like, catch everyone back up to speed, like, the Crystal situation, in case, you know, you guys forgot. Basically, you know, this is someone who's spent the past half of a year on the inactive roster for the Spark. He was indefinitely suspended after, you know, a public feud that had been going on over his attitude towards, you know, team practices. He had some extended absences from the team activities without really informing the team management. So there's this whole ongoing legal battle between Bilibili Gaming and Crystal. So they went out and they filed a request for arbitration at the China International Economic and Trade Arbitration Commission. And basically, the org is demanding Crystal compensate them for $2.2 million in reparation. Now, the charge are not handling anything in regards to the legal disputes. That is entirely on Crystal, and Crystal was picked up as a free agent. But, a lot of people look at this, and the knee-jerk reaction is, so you're basically taking on the problem child, because, obviously there was a lot of layers to why Crystal was doing what he was doing. Part of it might have been that he was homesick, and now he can compete in China. So maybe that will help alleviate any of, the other issues that he's had. But I'm just thinking, Ed, it's just like, man, $2.2 million, how the F is Crystal supposed to be paying that off?
Yeah, well,
that's a lot of money.
He's all right. If he actually gets told he needs to pay that, that is a joke. Like, that is just a joke. Now, granted, it's also China.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, people in China, but there's a lot of shady shit that goes on. So I first saw this. I'm like, okay, they're trying to go for the jugular with Crystal. And you know what? Something will probably get worked out behind the scenes, and everything will be hunky dory after that. It's a good sign in for the charge. I mean, Crystal still has skill, and when you think of it, if there's skill there, you will always get another shot.
Right.
No matter what, you'll always get another shot.
It's not really a gamble either, since he will be competing on the academy team.
Exactly.
So you got that feeling out process, basically. So you got to see what sort of commitment he's going to have with the organization before, they take that next step, should they decide to promote him. Which honestly probably wouldn't be until the next season anyway, depending on what the current contract situation is with some of the other DPS on their lineup.
Exactly. So, you know what? This was a smart signing for them. It's a very high reward, low risk signing for them. As far as their new sponsorship, it's Herbalife.
Herbalife.
Everyone's kind of heard of Herbalife, and the reason people think that it's a pyramid scheme is because John Oliver ran a story on it.
Okay.
So they're basing their facts off John Oliver, a late night comedian, like a Bill Maher type of person. So, you know what? Yes, he might have some facts, but he also writes it for comedy as well. So it's probably not a pyramid scheme. It's a Chinese-based company, though. That's the other big thing is, they're based out of China, but they're pretty massive in the U.S. and stuff like that. So the charge, obviously, PR-wise, probably not the best week for them, but from a company standpoint, great week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got some extra back in. You have a potential superstar in the limelight that, you can try to figure out whether there's still going to be something there and whether he works out for your team. So, it'll be an interesting couple of weeks. I'm curious to see how Ignition 1 is going to do, just because I know nothing about the team outside of, the only two-way players on that team.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, no, I don't know anything about Tier 2 over there. One other thing we actually don't have in the notes that I just want to point out real quick, and this has nothing to do with the charge. Before we get into our next, things. It was announced that Toronto Defiant, their parent company, is building a 7,000 to 10,000 person esports arena in Toronto.
Nice.
So it's another Overwatch team organization that is building a esports arena. Now, it's not just Toronto Defiant, it's and Toronto Ultra, they have a Call of Duty League, they're owned by the Toronto Maple Leafs, so it's kind of just like the Philadelphia Fusion.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to get that out there before I forget about it.
All right, so in roster news as well, we do know that Spree is no longer on the Houston Outlaws roster. His contract has come to an end. So Outlaws have lost another original roster member here. So Spree had basically joined the team, 3 years ago at this point with the org. And he's been with them since late 2017. And, prior to the Overwatch League, he was part of the FaZe Clan Overwatch team. So obviously, like the first thing that comes to mind with someone like Spree is the fact that he was a Zarya specialist. That's why he was brought on the team. He saw some pretty extensive play during the 3-3 meta, when Zaryas were pretty important, and at one point, they just were very dominant on Kane's Row, so much to the point that a lot of people were just calling it Spree's Row because the win rate was so high for the Outlaws on that particular map. But fast forward, and when you look at this current season, obviously, the Outlaws have seen a lot of changes to that roster. They went out, they picked up Meko. And unfortunately for Spree, he is yet to see any playtime this season. And I know there were a couple of times here recently where Spree was being fairly vocal about being benched on social media. And, of course, everyone's trying to, uplift him and try to, prop him up. So, when I saw that happening, and I want to say, this was within the past, 2 or 3 weeks even. And that was basically, the writing on the wall, where I'm just okay, I can't imagine he's going to be sticking around that much longer. So I don't know, what his next step is going to be. We have seen a couple of, Overwatch players kind of, transition into that coach's role. I know Gods actually is coaching a Contenders team along with another player. I'm trying to remember who that is. But, we have seen a lot of people stay in within the game still, but just move into a different sort of position. So I don't know if that is a sign that maybe Spree will look into, a tank coaching role with one of these teams out there. But can't say I'm too surprised because, we haven't really seen a lot of people just being these staple pieces for a very long period of time within the Overwatch League. So, making it, 2.5 years on a roster is actually pretty extensive compared to what the norm is when you factor in what the turnover has been. You're muted again, by the way.
Crap. It's an obvious, okay, you see Spree is no longer on the Outlaws. I'm shocked. You're oh, wait, when's the last time I even saw him in a match? Oh yeah, that was a year ago?
Yeah.
For the crappy Outlaws? It made sense for him to go. Whether I don't think he's gonna get another playing contract. To be a player on a team. I wouldn't be surprised if he switches games completely. I would say he either goes coaching or just retires completely. I don't see him being Valorant or Hyperscape or, any of these other, shooter games that are up and coming. But I do expect him to either go coaching, which would not surprise me that much. I just don't know as much about the behind the scenes with the Outlaws.
Mm-hmm.
How vocal he was and how much of a teacher he was behind the scenes. And, if anything, until they, before this year, the tanking situation, especially the off tanking, was not a thing to be looked well upon with the Houston Outlaws, so I don't know how much people want him to be.
I mean, to be fair, that kind of trickled over to the main tank situation because they have a DPS player at the main tank spot.
Right, their best tank is their DPS player they signed. But it wouldn't we've seen crazier things. He could become an assistant coach somewhere, kind of work his way up, Swoosh, the old Mayhem main tank. Is a coach now. And
well, I think the best case that we've seen, at least from that sort of transitional period, was probably Kuki.
Yeah, Kuki's the best case for all of that. But you know, we'll see where he joins, but I'd say it's 50-50 whether we ever hear his name in Overwatch again.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So outside of that, the other snippet of information was we got postseason plans, so we know what the format is going to be towards the end of the season. So actually, quite a bit here. So, as I mentioned, like the league is entering its final tournament of the season. So, of course, all of those eyes are shifting towards the end of the season. So, we got our postseason plans that include a play-in tournament. You also have these separate brackets to kind of like lead into the grand finals tournament, which is taking place in South Korea. Now, there's more to it than that, but I'll circle back because I know a lot of people are expecting one thing because they all are in one location. That does not mean what you think it means. But the way that they're doing this is that all 20 teams are going to have a shot at making the grand finals bracket, which is set to take place online in late September or early October. So no set date there, but it's important to note the grand finals are not a LAN tournament. It is online play. So, they're basically doing that, obviously because of the pandemic, but they're trying to remove any of the latency issues that would have happened should the NA teams stay where they were, and, obviously the Asian teams playing from either China or Korea. So what we know is basically we have the initial postseason bracket. So those will be split between, the North America side. You will have the Asia side, or the APAC, basically like mirroring what we have seen from the May Melee, the Summer Showdown, and the upcoming Countdown Cup, which is going to be taking place here shortly. And we got the postseason kicking off in September 3rd. So, there's the format is kind of like all over the place, I'll be honest. So it starts off with the play-ins. So the play-in bracket is essentially a single elimination bracket for the lower seeded teams. From there, you go into a double elimination format that will start on September 5th, and that will be for the teams that made it past the play-in tournament. So at that point, we'll see double elimination. We'll crown the top 4 teams, so we'll have the top 2 teams per region. So you'll basically, because it is double elimination, you'll have the winners from the upper bracket, you'll have the winner from the lower bracket on both sides there, and then, we enter the grand final tournament. So, I'm really anxious to see how this is going to unfold, because obviously you got to take into factor the seeding. And of course, the seeding will be determined based off of the final season standings. So that will, include any sort of additional wins that were accrued due to the tournament. So, like, Paris, after just winning the Summer Showdown, they have 3 more wins to their name. And for the most part, it looks like those top teams are going to have a bye. So you'll have, like, the 5 top seeded teams in NA and Asia having a bye into this tournament. So, obviously, you have that advantage going into the postseason. Now, I'm not too concerned about the fact that, it's not going to be a LAN tournament, but I know a lot of people were just like, oh, man, like that really upset them because, they figured at that point, maybe we'll have a little bit of changes, but everyone is just going like, all right, like, it has to be LAN, right? Nope. But, you gotta make do with what opportunity presents itself. And given the current climate, this is the best way to do it. Because obviously with the NA side, when they travel to South Korea, they're going to have to quarantine for 2 weeks. Same thing when they go back to NA. But everyone's not going to be in the same location. But I'm just glad that we finally have the postseason format and down at this point. And, we just got to see where the pieces fall in regards to the seed and to see which teams are going to have that advantage and which teams are going to have to fight to earn their spot into the actual tournament phase there.
So when I was reading this, what's the best way to describe this? You know that meme of Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where he's got all the red yarn going like from corner to corner with all the pegs in it, and he's like, listen now.
That conspiracy map, yeah.
Yeah, the conspiracy map. That is how I feel like the meeting at Overwatch League HQ. That's how it went when somebody proposed this idea. They're like, so what you see is, you know, you have the 20th team here, and they're going to be playing this team. But if they do this, then they're going to be facing up against this team, and then this is going to happen, and then we're going across the globe. See, and then you have to take 2 weeks off. They're just like, oh, sweet baby Jeebus, what is going on right now? I mean, it all makes sense in my head, but I'm still lost when trying to like compartmentalize what the frick is going on.
It's hard to visualize it when you don't have a bracket builder in front of you.
Like, I need visuals, Overwatch. I need a bracket to look at or something. Otherwise, this is all gibberish to me. Like, my brain doesn't work that quick. The majority of people's brains don't work that quick. They're like, well, they do this, and then this, and they're facing these people. Like, no, that's not how it works. Give me visuals. Gosh dang it. And I get that people are annoyed that they have to go to Asia to place to do this. 2 things about this. 3 things. 1, deal with it. 2, Asia has a bigger market for this than we do. They just do. I mean, they had 41,000 viewers this last week for the Overwatch League on YouTube. That doesn't include all of China.
Yeah, that doesn't include Bilibili.
Yeah, it does not include Bilibili. 41,000 on YouTube without any of China watching. So you know what? They've got a lot more viewers than us. 3. How do I put this nicely? The United States is a clusterfuck. And any company who's like, you know what, you should travel from a safe country to a country where you run the risk of dying more than anywhere else on the globe is just reckless. I don't even think they could travel over here at this point. Like, I don't think a team from South Korea could travel over to the United States. So it's like their hand was forced by Senior Dickhead.
Forced into a better situation.
Yes. Like, they're in better hands over there. Like, they're probably like, oh, thank God we get to leave this country. Like, good on you. That's what they're competing for. Better health. Like, they should just have a poster. Want to live? Win NA. You know? But all political jokes aside, it just makes the most sense for them to go over to South Korea and play over there. It's just a bigger market in general. And the South Korean teams or Chinese teams, there's no way they could come over to the US. So if they didn't go over there, everyone would just be on lands from South Korea to the US. And that's just unfair all around.
Yeah, the latency would be a nightmare.
Ons would be wrecking face.
So. Absolutely. But yeah. At this point, you know, we got to see what's going to happen with the Countdown Cup. And then, you know, we got a couple more games and we'll enter the postseason play. And, you know, I want to see, like, how much ground some of these tournament teams or tournament winners, so to speak, are going to do in regards to, like, the final placement. So when we get to that point, I definitely going to add to see, like, add in the total amount of wins accrued from their tournament places and see how much, like, that made them leapfrog over some other teams. Because playing in the actual tournament as opposed to being forced to play via the play-ins is an absolute massive deal when all the chips are on the line and all that money is at stake. Because there's a lot of money that is going to be up for grabs in the postseason because, you know, even if you finish like in fourth place, you're still earning $350,000. Just
Yeah.
making it to the double elimination bracket nets you $75,000. So it's a
Right.
pretty big deal, and you could win up to 1.5 million by being a league champion this year.
Yeah. And like it's going to be interesting to see because you had two winners from this past tournament that won on the basis of Genji.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mean Paris won it handedly. Not handedly, but like Paris was the better team obviously.
Yeah,
But
despite
they were only
despite the
better
amount
team
of
because
counterplay and how many
yeah,
accretions that Sparkle was getting hit by, they still made it work.
it was Genji. It's like whoever had the best Genji was gonna win. So it's like if they do nerf Genji, is Paris gonna be even remotely as good? Because then they lose that advantage. So it's definitely something I think we're gonna keep an eye on to see how these tournaments are gonna affect all the playoffs and stuff like that. But again, it hurts my brain thinking about scenarios when it comes to this.
Yeah, I mean, not even looking at how the bracket would work. It basically just seems like, okay, so on the NA side, you have 8 teams that are going through like the play-in process because the top 5 teams are make it through that next phase basically. But like on the Asia side, it's weirder because like if they're still doing the top 5 and there's only 7 teams, then what, you're only playing like one match and then you're doing the seeds? Like that's the thing that's weird. But either way, a lot of money on the line, $4 million in total at stakes for these playoffs.
$4 million. It had to be done, and I apologize for it, but it had to be done.
The only thing you're missing is Mr. Bigglesworth.
I can't pet the big cat and do the pinky and the side of the mouth thing at the same time.
That is true. But we could also deal with evil cats in Skuldomonse. So there's that in Hearthstone.
Val. Yay, new Hearthstone.
Yep, definitely be talking all about that tomorrow. But that's basically it, Ed. Like we had a kind of like a mixture, pretty even split actually between Overwatch news, esports news, and we got Overwatch League back this weekend. So we know what the hero pool is and all that. We covered that on OWL by the numbers this past night. Interested to see if Genji will be must pick still, knowing that Orisa and Brig, I'm pretty sure, are all banned this week. So yeah.
Oh yeah, no, Genji mandatory. Like you'll see Genji in every match.
Only time will tell. But that is going to wrap it up for us here tonight. So let's close out the show. So if you guys want to help us out, please do us a favor and head on over to iTunes and write us a review. Let us know how we're doing. We are 216 episodes in. And honestly, we don't know how many more episodes it will be until we have Overwatch 2 news. Hopefully not that many, but you never know.
Yes.
But we are always looking for ways to improve the show. If you guys have any sort of segment ideas or discussion points that you guys want us to talk about, or any recommendations on people to bring in, anything like that, please reach out to us. And if you would like to support our podcast or the podcast network that we are a part of, consider pledging to our Patreon page at patreon.com/OWL network. On the lower end, we do have the tier starting at just $1 a month. So you too can join the likes of our master and above patrons in Daniel, Owl, Kesha, Agent Life, and 044 in helping our network grow. So I want to thank you guys for all of your continued support throughout these months. But Ed, why don't you go ahead and let our listeners know how they can contact our show?
All right. So you can reach us through email at hndoverwatch@gmail.com. We are on Twitter, and that's at @hndoverwatch. We do have a website you can go over to, and that's www.owlnshow.com. We are on YouTube, and that's at youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. We do have a Discord you can join, and that's discord.me/OWLN Show. We do stream live on Twitch at twitch.tv/OWLN Show. We are Twitch affiliates, so come help support the show by subscribing to our channel and earn our network emoticon. Our podcast network does stream pretty regularly. So on Mondays at 6 p.m. Pacific, we have the Overwatch League Network. On Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, we have OWL by the Numbers. And then on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific, we have this show, Heroes Never Die. Thursdays, Totem and I do Tavern Tales, which is the Hearthstone Battlegrounds podcast, which airs at 5 p.m. Pacific, but that's over on twitch.tv/Tavern Tales HS. You can contact me personally on Twitter, and that's at Ednar83, or on Twitch at twitch.tv/Edinar. Totem, where can they find you at?
Well, I'm over on Twitter, constantly trolling people and drinking at Totally Drunk. And of course, I also do a scary movie podcast, which is Handle with Scare, which is available on podcatchers as well. So with that being said, guys, I do want to thank you for joining us for another episode of Heroes Never Die. This has been episode number 216, and Ed and I will see you hopefully tomorrow in the tavern when we discuss all of the goodness that came with the new patch and, the expansion announcement. A lot of good stuff to talk about on that front. So you guys take care, enjoy the Overwatch League games this weekend, and have a good night.
Peace out.